My name is Sarah Mitchell, or at least it was for the first 28 years of my life. For the last 3, I've been Sarah Blackwell, a name that felt less like an inheritance and more like a costume I was never quite comfortable in. I grew up in a small town in the foothills of the Cascades, a place where the air smells of pine needles and damp earth, and success is measured by the fullness of your woodpile, not the label on your handbag. I was a girl who climbed trees, who preferred muddy boots to high heels, who believed the best conversations happened around a campfire, not across a linen-draped table. Then I met Corey Blackwell, and for a while I believed he was a different kind of adventure. He was ambitious, polished, a man who moved through the world with an unnerving confidence, as if he'd been given the instruction manual and the rest of us were just guessing. He saw something in me he called raw potential, and I, flattered and a little starstruck, allowed him to become my sculptor. He chipped away at my rough edges, smoothed my unpolished surfaces, and reshaped me into someone he could proudly display. I learned which fork to use, how to pronounce Chateauneuf-du-Pape, and how to smile placidly when he corrected my grammar in front of his friends. I traded my hiking boots for stilettos, my love for spicy food for a delicate palate, and my own opinions for his. In return, he gave me a life that looked perfect from the outside, a life of luxury and access that the girl from the mountains could never have imagined. The story of how that perfect life shattered begins not with a shout, but with a whisper in a place designed to muffle any sound of dissent. The restaurant hummed with the quiet, confident murmur of wealth. It was the kind of place Corey loved, a jewel box of dark wood, crystal, and muted lighting in the heart of Napa Valley. We were there for our 3rd anniversary, a weekend he had meticulously planned and was now meticulously documenting for his online followers. Across from me, a floor-to-ceiling mirror reflected a woman I barely recognized. Her hair, which I'd always worn in a long, simple braid, was swept into an intricate chignon that made my neck ache. She wore a silk dress the color of champagne, a dress Corey had chosen because it complemented his aesthetic. She sat perfectly still, her hands folded in her lap, a portrait of serene elegance. A lie. The lady will have the sea base, Corey was saying to our server, a woman with kind eyes and a weary smile. But make sure the kitchen goes easy on the seasoning. She has a very delicate palate. I opened my mouth to protest, to say that I'd been dreaming of the lamb with the fiery harissa crust, that my palate was anything but delicate. But the words caught in my throat, tangled in the years of learned compliance. It was easier to just nod. It had started with small things, his casual dismissal of a movie I wanted to see or a restaurant I wanted to try. "Trust me, sweetie," he'd say, flashing the smile that had once disarmed me. "I know what you'll enjoy more than you do." And slowly, terrifyingly, I had started to believe him. The server's gaze flickered to me, a silent question in her eyes. I saw a flicker of concern or maybe just pity. I wanted to send her a signal to blink twice for help, but I just offered a small, tight smile and looked down at my water glass. When had my own desires become so difficult to voice? As the server walked away, the low thrum of the restaurant seemed to recede, creating a pocket of silence just for us. Corey leaned forward, his cologne, a scent he'd chosen for its notes of power and influence, filling the space between us. He reached across the table, not to take my hand but to adjust the fold of my napkin. His voice dropped to the intimate whisper he used for pronouncements he considered profound. "You know," he said, his tone casual as if he were commenting on the weather, "I've been thinking. I've put so much work into you, into building you up. But you'll never really be enough, will you?" The words didn't land like a blow. They seeped into me, a slow-acting poison. They were delivered without anger, without malice, just the calm, factual certainty of a diagnosis. He wasn't trying to hurt me, he was simply stating what he believed to be an unchangeable truth. My hand, which had been reaching for my glass, froze midair. What did you just say?" My voice was a ghost of its usual sound. "You heard me." He leaned back, taking a sip of the Sauvignon Blanc he'd ordered for us. "It's not your fault entirely. You came from a simple background. But I thought with the right guidance, the right environment, you could become someone truly worthy of the life I'm providing. You've improved, of course. But you're not improving fast enough. There's a ceiling to your potential." Around us, other couples laughed, their faces illuminated by candlelight and genuine affection. A man at the next table was telling a story that made his wife laugh so hard she snorted, and he just beamed at her, his love for her unvarnished joy written all over his face. At our table, the air had turned to glass. I stared at Corey, really stared at him, and for the first time, I saw past the handsome facade, the confident charm, the carefully curated image. I saw a man whose love was conditional, transactional. I wasn't his partner, I was his project. His Pygmalion fantasy. And I, his Galatea, was failing to live up to the perfection of his design. This trip, I said, the words coming out slowly, each one a heavy stone. This whole weekend, it's been a test, hasn't it? He shrugged, meticulously buttering a piece of bread. Everything is a test, Sarah. Life is a performance. Some people just aren't cut out for the main stage. My gaze drifted back to the mirror. This time, I saw what he saw, a woman diminished, a shadow puppeteered by her husband's ambitions. The expensive dress felt like a straitjacket. The elegant hairstyle felt like a cage for my thoughts. I had learned all the rules of his world, how to dress, what to say, which fork to use, but in doing so, I had forgotten the fundamental grammar of my own soul. Remember our first date? He asked, a nostalgic smile playing on his lips as he cut into his perfectly rare steak. You ordered that ridiculously spicy Indian curry at that hole-in-the-wall place. You were sweating by the end of it. Your nose was running. It was a mess. I remembered that date very differently. I remembered laughing until my ribs ached. I remembered telling him stories about backpacking through Thailand, feeling seen and alive. The curry had been glorious, a riot of flavor that made my tongue sing. Yes, I'd been sweating, but I'd been incandescently happy. When had being happy become a mess? I was being myself, I whispered. Exactly, he said, his smile widening as if he just wanted debate. And look how much more refined you are now. Look at this place. 3 years ago, you wouldn't have even known how to get a reservation here. The rage, when it came, wasn't hot and explosive. It was cold and sharp, a shard of ice forming in my chest. It was the anger of 1,000 tiny concessions, a million unspoken truths. It was the righteous fury of a woman realizing she had willingly participated in her own erasure. The mirror didn't just show me a stranger, it showed me a crime scene, and I was both the victim and an accomplice. Something inside me didn't just crack, it shattered. I need some air, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. I pushed my chair back, the legs scraping softly against the polished floor. We haven't finished dinner, Corey said, his voice laced with the familiar tone of disapproval. People are looking. Let them look, I said, the words feeling foreign and powerful on my tongue. The surprise that flashed across his face was more satisfying than any meal I could have eaten. I walked through the restaurant, my head held high. I passed the table with the laughing couple, and for a fleeting second, the woman's eyes met mine, and she gave me a small, almost imperceptible nod of solidarity. Outside, the cool night air was a benediction on my hot face. I stood on the sidewalk under a sky full of indifferent stars, and finally I could breathe. Through the large window I could see Corey. He wasn't looking for me. He hadn't followed me. He had already picked up his phone, his thumb scrolling, his face illuminated by the screen's pale glow. He was back in his world, managing his image, curating his perfect life. My absence was a minor inconvenience, easily ignored. Standing there, alone on a street corner in a town that wasn't mine, wearing a dress that wasn't me, I understood. This wasn't love. This was colonization of the soul. He hadn't been building me up. He'd been tearing me down and using the rubble to build a monument to himself. The mirror had shown me the woman I had become. The darkness outside showed me the possibility of who I could be again. The only question was whether I was brave enough to find my way back. A different kind of plan began to form, not of revenge but of reclamation. I returned to the table 20 minutes later, my composure a carefully constructed mask. Corey barely glanced up from his phone. I noticed he'd had the server clear my untouched sea base, and he was now enjoying a decadent chocolate lava cake. He had likely eaten his and ordered another for himself. Feel better? He asked, before immediately launching into an analysis of his latest Instagram post. 112 likes in under an hour. The engagement on this trip is phenomenal. I smiled and nodded, but my mind was whirring. A quiet engine coming to life after years of dormancy. While he talked about algorithms and hashtags, I was studying him not as a wife but as a strategist. I was gathering intelligence. Back in our sprawling suite at the Grand Harbor Hotel, Corey's nightly ritual began. He moved through the room like a film director staging photos. The champagne bottle artfully angled against the ice bucket. The view from the balcony captured at the perfect moment of twilight. The fret robes draped just so on the king-sized bed. Here, stand by the window, he commanded, holding up his phone. I want a shot of us. Look happy. Look like you're having the time of your life. I stood where he told me to. I tilted my chin the way he liked. I produced the soft, adoring smile he expected. But as he fussed with the lighting, my eyes were scanning the room, memorizing details. the location of the emergency exit sign down the hall, the brand of the electronic safe, the way the housekeeping carts were organized in the morning. I was no longer a passive occupant of this space. I was casing the joint. "Perfect," he said, already absorbed in applying a filter. "This will be my most liked photo of the year. I can feel it." While he was lost in the digital world, I excused myself to the bathroom. I didn't primp. I stood by the door listening. His social media routine was as predictable as the tides. Post photo. Monitor likes. Respond to comments from important people. Took him on average 15 minutes. I used those 15 minutes to begin my own work. On my phone, using a private browser, I navigated to the Grand Harbor's booking website. My fingers flew across the screen, securing a modest single room on the 3rd floor. I booked it under the name Sarah Mitchell. Seeing my maiden name on the confirmation email felt like finding a forgotten photograph of a dear old friend. I saved the details to a secure, password-protected folder on my phone. The next 2 days were a masterclass in being invisible in plain sight. I told Corey I was going to the spa. Instead, I walked every floor of the hotel, timing the elevators, noting the shift changes of the staff, and observing the hotel's operational rhythm. I learned that the head of housekeeping, a formidable woman named Maria, ran her department with military precision. I learned that the daytime concierge was easily flustered, but the night manager, a quiet man named David, was competent and discreet. Most importantly, I learned that while the hotel was a fortress of luxury, its systems had vulnerabilities if you knew where to look. During this time, I watched Corey interact with the people who served him. He treated them not as human beings but as functions. He snapped his fingers at a busboy. He complained loudly that the pool attendant hadn't fluffed his towel correctly. He sent back a coffee because the foam on his cappuccino was, in his words, structurally unsound. "These people should be grateful," he said to me one evening, after berating a young valet for taking 30 seconds too long to bring the car around. "This is the closest they'll ever get to a life like ours." The old Sarah would have been mortified, would have apologized profusely on his behalf. The new Sarah just watched, listened, and filed it all away. Every act of arrogance, every casual cruelty, was another brick in the foundation of my resolve. The turning point in my plan came on our 3rd day. While Corey was engrossed in a lengthy phone call by the pool, loudly advising a colleague on brand synergy, I told him I was going back to the room to rest. Inside the suite, I opened the safe. The combination was, predictably, his birthday. Inside were our passports and his backup credit cards. I took them all. I slipped my own passport, a credit card in my maiden name, and a stash of emergency cash I'd been siphoning from our joint account for months into my handbag. In place of his cards, I left a collection of expired gift cards and a single crisp $2 bill. His passport I hid in a secret zippered compartment in my own suitcase. That evening, as he was in the shower, singing along loudly to a podcast about venture capital, I performed the final critical step. I took his room key from the bedside table and swapped it with the key to my secret room on the 3rd floor. They were identical white plastic rectangles, indistinguishable to the casual eye. His key would no longer open the door to his curated kingdom. My old key, now his, would only open the door to a small empty room he didn't know existed. "Did you see that comment from the CEO of OptiCorp?" he called from the bathroom. "He said our trip looks aspirational." "That's the exact word I was going for." "That's wonderful, dear," I called back, my heart beating a steady, determined rhythm. He never noticed the swap. He never noticed that I'd packed a small, separate overnight bag. He never noticed that the woman who had entered this hotel suite with him was no longer the same person. He was so consumed by his own reflection that he was blind to the world, and the woman right in front of him. On our final night, I lay beside him in the vast bed, listening to the sound of his even breathing. In sleep, his face was smooth, almost boyish. A ghost of the man I thought I'd married flickered in the dim light. I felt a pang, not of love, but of a strange, sad nostalgia for the woman I had been. The woman who had believed so desperately that his love could be earned if she just tried hard enough. I let myself feel the grief for that lost woman, for those lost years. And then I let it go. Tomorrow my life would begin again. Tonight I was just saying goodbye. The alarm on my internal clock went off at 4:47 a.m. The room was dark, silent except for Corey's rhythmic breathing. I slipped out of bed with a practiced stealth I didn't know I possessed. My movements were fluid and silent. In the walk-in closet, I bypassed the rows of Sarah Blackwell clothes. The designer dresses, the cashmere sweaters, the silk blouses, they were all part of a costume for a role I was finished playing. I reached into the very back and pulled out the clothes I'd arrived in. Clothes I'd insisted on bringing over Corey's objections. A pair of worn-in jeans that fit my body perfectly. A soft, faded cotton t-shirt. A pair of sturdy boots made for walking, not for posing. Dressing in them felt like putting my own skin back on. My pre-packed overnight bag was ready by the door. It contained my passport, my real credit cards, my hidden cash, and a few sentimental items that belonged only to me. A worn paperback copy of a favorite novel, a silver locket from my grandmother, a photo of my sister and me laughing on a beach. From the desk, I took a piece of the hotel's heavy, cream-colored stationery. With a steady hand, I wrote 4 words in my own clear handwriting. Not your project anymore. I didn't write an explanation. He wouldn't have understood it anyway. I placed the note on his pillow, right where his hand would land when he reached for his phone, which he would do approximately 30 seconds after waking. I let myself out of the suite, closing the door with a soft final click. The hallway was hushed and empty. I didn't take the guest elevator. I took the service elevator at the end of the hall, the one I'd scouted on my reconnaissance missions. It smelled faintly of bleach and industry, the smell of real work. Downstairs, the night manager David was at the front desk. He looked up and gave me a small, knowing smile. I had spoken to him the previous evening, explaining a discrepancy in my upcoming travel plans. "Good morning, Ms. Mitchell," he said, using my real name. Sounded like music. "Good morning, David," I replied, my voice clear and calm. "Is everything in order?" "Yes, ma'am." He slid a folio across the marble counter. "As you requested, all charges for the suite, including all incidentals from the past 4 days, have been transferred to a separate bill under the name Corey Blackwell. Your bill for your room is settled. Your taxi to the airport is waiting at the service entrance. Every spa treatment Corey had insisted I get, every overpriced bottle of wine he'd ordered to impress someone, every room service meal he'd chosen for me, the bill was staggering, well over $8,000. It was all his now. Thank you, David. For everything." "It was my pleasure, Ms. Mitchell," he said, and his eyes held a glimmer of genuine respect. "Safe travels." I walked out the service door and into the cool pre-dawn air. The taxi was waiting just as he'd said. I got in without a backward glance. The hotel with its facade of perfect luxury receded in the rearview mirror. I felt a tremor run through me, but it wasn't fear. It was the shutter of a cage door swinging open. At the airport, sitting in the departure lounge with a cup of strong, black coffee, my new burner phone buzzed. An unknown number from the Napa area. The hotel. I let it ring. A minute later, it buzzed again. And again. A small smile touched my lips. The performance was beginning, and for the first time, I was in the audience. Curiosity, however, is a stubborn thing. During my layover in Denver, I couldn't resist. I opened my laptop and, using the guest Wi-Fi, logged into the Grand Harbor's online guest portal. My credentials as Sarah Mitchell were still active. The activity log for Suite 847 told a beautiful, chaotic story. 7:23 a.m. Guest services call from room 847. Guest claims keycard is malfunctioning. 7:31 a.m. Second call from room 847. Guest claims keycard is still not working after being reissued. Reports being locked out. 7:45 a.m. Security dispatched to room 847 to grant access. Guest is highly agitated. 8:12 a.m. Call to front desk from guest in 847. Mr. Blackwell questioning billing. Claims fraudulent charges have been applied to his account. 8:18 a.m. Security escort requested for Mr. Blackwell. Guest attempting to leave the floor without a valid keycard. 8:31 a.m. Manager on duty reports to front desk. Mr. Blackwell is disputing over $8,000 in charges for spa, dining, and minibar. Claims they were for his wife. 9:07 a.m. Guest services note. Mr. Blackwell demanding contact information for Ms. Sarah Mitchell. Request denied due to privacy policy. 9:15 a.m. Guest services note. Mr. Blackwell now claiming his passport and wallet have been stolen from the room safe. 9:23 a.m. Security note. Mr. Blackwell is unable to provide any secondary identification to file a formal report of theft. 9:45 a.m. Front desk note. Mr. Blackwell requesting to use a hotel phone. Emergency contact list accessed. Only one number available, a Bella Morrison. Call was placed. 10:02 a.m. Security report. Mr. Blackwell's call was brief. He appears more agitated than before. 10:28 a.m. Front desk note. Mr. Blackwell attempted to pay for a taxi to the airport. All personal credit cards on file have been declined. I laughed out loud, a real unrestrained laugh that earned me a few strange looks from my fellow travelers. His emergency contact, Bella, the paragon of perfection he always held over me, had apparently offered him no salvation. And the final, beautiful detail, the wallet. Before leaving, I had removed his valid credit cards and driver's license. In their place, I'd left his expired university ID, a library card from his hometown, and a single, brightly colored business card I'd picked up from a display in town. It read, Silva & Partners, Family Law Specialists. Free 30-minute consultation. 11:05 a.m. Lobby security note. Mr. Blackwell is creating a disturbance in the lobby. He is still in his hotel robe and slippers. Local police have been called. I closed the laptop as my boarding group was called. The image of Corey, the man who valued image above all else, standing in the opulent lobby of the Grand Harbor Hotel in a complimentary bathrobe, trying to explain his situation to police officers without a shred of identification, was a masterpiece of karmic art. He had spent 3 years telling me I wasn't enough. Now stripped of his money, his identity, and his power, he was the one who was left with nothing. As I walked down the jetway to my flight to Portland, a city where no one knew me as anyone but myself, I felt lighter than I had in years. I wasn't running away. I was flying toward the woman I was always meant to be. The story of Sarah Blackwell was over. The story of Sarah Mitchell was just beginning. The flight to Portland was a buffer, a gentle transition between two worlds. I watched the clouds drift by, feeling not the frantic energy of escape, but the profound calm of arrival. The woman next to me, a grandmotherly type with kind eyes, was knitting a tiny colorful sock. We didn't speak, but her quiet, creative industry was a soothing presence. Portland greeted me not with the polished gleam of Napa, but with the soft, gray mist of home. The air smelled of rain and coffee and independence. I took the light rail into the city, watching the landscape shift from industrial zones to quirky neighborhoods vibrant with street art and overgrown gardens. The anonymity was intoxicating. I was just another face in the crowd, my story my own, my destination unknown to anyone but me. My temporary home was a small apartment above a used bookstore in the Alberta Arts District. The owner, a woman named Janet with paint-flecked silver hair and a no-nonsense demeanor, handed me the keys with a wry smile. Running from something or to something? She asked, her eyes sharp and perceptive. A little of both, I think, I replied. She nodded, satisfied. That's the best way. Welcome. The apartment was simple, filled with mismatched furniture, shelves overflowing with books, and windows that looked out onto a street bustling with life. That first night, I did something I hadn't done in 3 years. I ordered the spiciest dish on the menu from a local Thai place, a curry so fiery it made my eyes water and my nose run. I sat on the floor, cross-legged, and ate it straight from the container, tears of both capsaicin and catharsis streaming down my face. It was a baptism by fire, washing away years of bland, curated meals. The days that followed were a quiet pilgrimage back to myself. I rediscovered the simple joys Corey had deemed unsophisticated. I spent hours in Janet's bookstore downstairs, breathing in the scent of old paper and ink. I bought novels with lurid covers and poetry that didn't make sense but made me feel something. I walked for miles in the rain, my face turned up to the sky, my sturdy boots splashing in puddles. I found a coffee shop that served enormous blueberry pancakes at 3 in the afternoon, and I ordered them without a flicker of shame. The healing wasn't a lightning strike, it was a slow, steady dawn. It happened in the small moments. The first time I laughed out loud in a movie theater without checking to see if I was being too loud. The afternoon I spent painting a terrible watercolor of the view from my window, just for the joy of mixing the colors. The evening I called my sister and we talked for 2 hours about nothing and everything, my voice free and unmonitored. You sound different, she said, her voice warm over the line. You sound like you again. I realized I'd forgotten what that sounded like. 2 months into my new life, a text message appeared on my phone from an unknown number. My heart gave a little lurch, a phantom limb of anxiety. Why did you do it? It was him. The 5 words were heavy with his signature blend of accusation and bewilderment. There was no apology, no introspection, just the implicit demand that I justify myself to him, that I center his feelings one last time. The old Sarah would have agonized over a reply. She would have drafted pages of explanation, a thesis on their failed marriage, a desperate plea to be understood. She would have felt the familiar pull of his emotional gravity, the urge to manage his confusion. I looked at the message, at the blinking cursor waiting for my response. I thought of the woman in the mirror at the restaurant, so silent and still. I thought of the man in the bathrobe in the hotel lobby, stripped of his power. And I thought of the woman I was now, the one who ate spicy food and walked in the rain and was slowly, painstakingly, rebuilding her own world. His question wasn't a search for understanding. It was a final, desperate grasp for control. With a strange sense of peace, I blocked the number and deleted the message without replying. My silence was the only answer he would ever need, and the only one he truly deserved. 6 months later, I moved into my own small apartment in Portland, a sunny space with a window box where I planted herbs that smelled of earth and potential. One day, unpacking a box of miscellaneous items, I found the brightly colored business card for the divorce lawyers I'd left in Corey's wallet. I smiled, a genuine, unforced smile. I bought a simple, inexpensive frame and placed the card on my desk. It wasn't a trophy of revenge. It was a reminder. A reminder that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to be someone's project. It was a testament to the fact that walking away isn't always an act of giving up, but an act of finally, bravely choosing yourself. Corey had been wrong about almost everything, but on one point, he had been accidentally correct. I would never be enough for him. I would never be small enough, quiet enough, or pliable enough to fit into the narrow confines of his world. But sitting here in my own space, surrounded by my own books, with the scent of my own cooking in the air, I understood a truth that was deeper and more resonant than any judgment he could ever pass. I was and always had been more than enough for me, and that felt like the beginning of everything.